Gospel artist, songwriter, and pastor Charles Jenkins is well known for his powerful music and his leadership in the ministry. Jenkins, who was born in the United States on December 14th, 1975, has had a huge effect on both the gospel music industry and the Christian faith community. From his early life, which was based on spirituality, to his success as a pastor and gospel artist, Jenkins's life story is one of inspiration and determination. His faith-based upbringing can be seen in his desire to use his skills to inspire and uplift others. His love of music and worship was not just a hobby, it was a way of life. In response to the calling that would eventually make him one of the most important people in gospel music and church leadership, Charles Jenkins went to college to study theology. He went to the Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, Illinois, which is one of the most prestigious theological schools in the country. This education was very important to Jenkins because it gave him a strong theological background, and the knowledge and skills needed for pastoral leadership are what Charles Jenkins is known for as the outstanding senior pastor of Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church in Chicago, a position he held from 2000 to 2019. During his leadership, the church's membership and outreach to the community grew significantly. The legendary Reverend Clay Evans Jenkins had to take over for a beloved founding pastor, but through his vision, dedication, and spiritual guidance, Jenkins not only kept the church's legacy alive but also grew its influence in amazing ways. Taking over for Reverend Clay Evans Jenkins wasn't easy. Evans wasn't just any pastor, he was the founder of Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church. Reverend Evans was a well-known and respected figure in the Chicago faith community for his dynamic preaching, civil rights activism, and impact on the lives of many people. He left an indelible mark on the church he founded. His charisma, leadership, and spiritual influence built a strong foundation that would be hard for anyone to follow. When Jenkins became senior pastor in 2000, he took over a church that was already in good shape. As the new leader of Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church, Charles Jenkins had to win the trust and confidence of a congregation that was very loyal to Reverend Evans. He did this with humility and a clear vision, recognizing the huge impact of his predecessor, while also setting out to make his own way as a leader. Being able to embrace the past while looking to the future was a key part of his success as the new face of Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church. Under Jenkins's leadership, the church went through a period of growth that had never been seen before. One of his most impressive accomplishments was the rise in church membership. More people joined because of the church's friendly atmosphere, exciting worship services, and helpful community programs. Jenkins's dynamic preaching style and his ability to connect with people from all walks of life were also big draws. Were very important in getting new people to join the congregation. Jenkins led programs that gave people in need food, clothing, school supplies, and job training. These programs were meant to give people and families power by giving them practical help and sharing the message of God's love. Jenkins strengthened the church's role as a place of support and encouragement during hard times by taking care of both the spiritual and physical needs of the community. His focus on social justice and community involvement was inspired by the work of Reverend Clay Evans, who was also known for his activism. Jenkins continued this tradition by working to promote justice, equality, and positive change in Chicago. His leadership went beyond the pulpit. He became a voice for those who didn't have one, working with other leaders to fix systemic problems that hurt the city's most vulnerable people. Charles Jenkins wasn't afraid to try new things in his ministry. He knew that church involvement was changing in the digital age, so he used new technology and creative strategies to reach a wider audience. For example, he used social media, live streaming services, and digital communication to connect with churchgoers and people who weren't in the church. Charles Jenkins has not only made his mark as a pastor and a well-known figure in the gospel music industry. He went from being in charge of a church to being in charge of gospel music without any problems, because his deep love of worship and powerful message touched people all over the world. In 2012, Charles Jenkins released his first album, The Best of Both Worlds, which was his official entry into the gospel music industry. The title of the album reflected Jenkins's. He was dedicated to both pastoral leadership and music, and he wanted to combine traditional elements of gospel with modern influences. The album Roots was a bold statement of his versatility as an artist and a pastor, showing that he could reach a wide audience while staying true to his faith. It received critical acclaim for its unique approach, combining traditional elements of gospel with modern influences. The Best of Both Worlds was more than just a music project, it was a ministry in action. Jenkins's deep theological insights and powerful lyrics were woven into every track, making it a collection of songs that spoke to both longtime gospel fans and a new generation of worshipers. This song, which is the lead single from Jenkins's first album, Awesome, was meant to encourage listeners and bring them closer to their faith. It quickly became a hit in the gospel music world, with its simple but powerful lyrics speaking of God's greatness and faithfulness. Awesome was an instant hit thanks to its soulful melody and catchy arrangement. The song's message of praise and worship struck a chord in church communities, making it a modern gospel classic. Awesome didn't just touch people's hearts, it ruled the charts, reaching #1 on the Billboard Gospel Music charts. Its success wasn't limited to the gospel community, it spread to Christian music circles as well, where it continued to get a lot of airplay. Recognition, the song's universal appeal and focus on God's qualities made it a favorite among churches, worship teams, and gospel radio stations across the country. Awesome's success wasn't just shown in its chart performance, it also earned Charles Jenkins many praise and awards. The song's impact on the gospel music industry was recognized at several award shows, where Jenkins received multiple honors for. These awards recognized Jenkins's skill as a songwriter, singer, and innovator in gospel music. Jenkins's ability to write a song that could bring worshipers together in praise and connect deeply with listeners' spiritual experiences showed how gifted he was as a musician and a spiritual leader. Building on the success of his first album, Awesome, Jenkins continued to make music that spoke to people. He released more albums like Any Given Sunday 2015 and Think About These Things 2016, which had hit songs like War and Grace, showed how versatile Jenkins is as an artist by combining modern sounds with traditional gospel elements while keeping a strong focus on messages of faith, hope, and empowerment. War, another powerful anthem, became a rallying cry for people going through life's battles. The song's message of spiritual warfare and victory hit hard, similar to Awesome, showing that Jenkins can make music that not only entertains but also inspires and uplifts. He built a loyal fan base and solidified his place in the gospel music industry by consistently releasing songs that were both spiritually and musically compelling. Charles Jenkins's impact on gospel music goes beyond his #1 hits. It lies in his ability to use music as a tool for ministry and connection. His approach to gospel music has always been deeply rooted in his role as a pastor. He doesn't just see his music as entertainment, as a form of worship and a way to share the message of God's love and grace. Jenkins's songs are meant to inspire faith, promote spiritual growth, and offer comfort and support to those who need it the most. Charles Jenkins has definitely left a lasting mark on the world of gospel music. His ability to write songs that deeply connect with believers, along with his dedication to ministry. Jenkins has become a leading voice in modern gospel music. He has used his fame to not only inspire others but also to mentor up-and-coming artists, helping them find their own voices in the industry. Pastor Charles Jenkins is praised for his leadership at Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church and his achievements in gospel music. He has also faced many challenges and personal issues. Pastor Charles Jenkins has had many challenges in his career, including taking over as senior pastor at Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church in Chicago after the famous pastor died, and keeping his spiritual focus while having a successful career and balancing his personal and professional life. One of the hardest things he had to do was become senior pastor after the famous pastor died. Reverend Evans started the church in 1950 and was a respected leader, civil rights activist, and spiritual guide to many. His leadership and influence were deeply ingrained in the church and the community, making him a revered figure whose shoes were very hard to fill. When Jenkins became senior pastor in 2000, he had the difficult job of following in Evans's footsteps. Taking over from Reverend Evans wasn't just about taking on a new role, it was also about honoring the church's rich history and continuing the work of a leader who had shaped its identity for decades. Jenkins was under a lot of pressure to meet the expectations of the congregation, many of whom had a close personal connection with Reverend Evans. The challenge was to find a balance between honoring the traditions that Reverend Evans had set up and bringing in his own vision for the church's future. Future Jenkins knew it was important to honor the legacy that had been built, while also recognizing that the church needed to grow and change to stay relevant in the modern world. This balancing act required him to be wise, humble, and have a strong sense of purpose as he led a congregation through a time of change as a well-known figure in both the ministry and the music industry. Charles Jenkins has been the subject of public scrutiny and criticism. Being in the spotlight comes with high expectations and pressures, and Jenkins has had to deal with the complexities of his dual roles as a spiritual leader and gospel artist. As a church leader, Jenkins has had to deal with the inevitable public attention on his personal and professional life. Every decision Pastor Jenkins made was open to public scrutiny. This included his. Jenkins tried to bring the Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church up to date by starting new programs and expanding the church's outreach efforts. Some members and outsiders were skeptical of these changes, worried that the church would move away from its traditional roots. Leading a church through transitions is often met with criticism, especially when members are deeply connected to long-standing traditions and practices. Jenkins also added modern elements to the churches. Some people didn't like the changes he made to the worship style and service structure. They weren't just against the changes themselves, but also about how they might change the church's identity. Dealing with these different points of view required Jenkins to be diplomatic and thoughtful, always trying to honor the church's history while also welcoming new ideas for the future. People have also looked closely at Charles Jenkins's personal life. As a pastor, his private actions and decisions were often seen through a moral lens, and people expected him to behave better than other public figures. The truth is that as a spiritual leader, your personal life is rarely seen as truly personal. Jenkins, like many leaders, had to work hard to keep a healthy work-life balance while being watched by his congregation and the media. Any mistakes or controversies, no matter how small, could be blown out of proportion and criticized. The public's focus on his private life put pressure on him to live up to the standards expected of a man in his position, which made it hard to show weakness or admit struggles that everyone goes through. Despite the difficulties of public scrutiny, Pastor Charles Jenkins has consistently shown that he is a good example of what it means to be vulnerable. Jenkins is often chosen to deal with criticism with humility and a focus on his mission to serve God and his community. He has also been open about how hard it is to be a leader in public. recognizing that criticism is a part of the journey for everyone who wants to make a difference. One of Jenkins's best strategies has been to let his actions speak louder than his critics. Instead of arguing with people in public or being defensive, he has focused on doing his work in music and ministry with honesty and integrity. By staying true to his calling and goals, Jenkins has shown that his purpose is not affected by what other people think or the pressures of the moment. Jenkins has not only had to deal with the pressures of public life, but also the challenges that come with balancing his personal and family obligations. While specific problems in his family life are not widely reported, Jenkins' journey as a husband, father, pastor, musician, and public figure has undoubtedly tested his faith and strength. One of the biggest problems Pastor Charles Jenkins has faced is the delicate balance between his personal and professional obligations. Jenkins had to balance a demanding career with his family life. As the senior pastor of Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church for almost 20 years, he was in charge of a large congregation, community outreach projects, and the spiritual growth of his church members. At the same time, Jenkins became famous in the gospel music industry with hits like Awesome and War Required. He had to spend a lot of time recording, promoting, and performing his music. Balancing these two big commitments put a lot of stress on his time and energy. For Jenkins, the hardest part was finding time to be with his family, while also taking care of his many career duties. Being a pastor and a musician often means long hours, a lot of travel, and a never-ending schedule that doesn't leave much time for rest. People expect spiritual leaders to always be there for their congregations, giving them advice, support, and a sense of stability. Being a public figure means that people are always looking at your life, and this includes the lives of your family members. For Charles Jenkins, being in the spotlight as both a pastor and a gospel singer meant that people were always looking at his family's private life. The attention that came with his public role sometimes put too much pressure on his family to live up to the same high standards that people expected of him as a spiritual leader. People expect a pastor's family to. It can be hard for family members of spiritual leaders to live up to unrealistic standards of morality and faith. These standards often don't take into account their humanity or the normal problems that any family faces. This public scrutiny can cause stress and discomfort for the family as their actions and decisions may be seen through a different lens. Because they are related to a famous person, Jenkins has probably had to protect his family from this kind of public pressure, while also trying to make sure they can live their lives without being judged all the time. While specifics about Jenkins's personal and family struggles are not widely known, it's clear that balancing the demands of his career with making sure his family is taken care of has tested Jenkins's strength as a leader who has spoken out about how important faith is. Jenkins probably turns to his spiritual beliefs for strength and direction when he's going through personal problems. His faith not only supports his work as a pastor and musician, but it also shapes how he deals with problems. Jenkins's strength can also be seen in his unwavering commitment to self-improvement and growth, even when things got hard. He has always looked for ways to become a better leader, husband, and father. He knows that leadership is more than just speaking from the pulpit or the stage. It's about showing his family and congregation that true strength comes from being vulnerable, humble, and willing to learn from life's problems. In 2019, Pastor Charles Jenkins made the hard decision to step down as the senior pastor. Jenkins had been the spiritual leader of the thriving Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church in Chicago for almost 20 years. This big change was not only a big turning point in Jenkins's career, but it was also an emotional and difficult time for the church and its members. Jenkins had to make the decision to step down as the spiritual leader of a community he had helped grow and thrive. Charles Jenkins's decision to step down as senior pastor of Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church was not an easy one. It was based on a mix of personal, professional, and spiritual factors. After almost 20 years of leading the church, Jenkins felt that it was time to move on to a new phase of his life, one that would allow him to pursue other goals in music and ministry. For Jenkins, stepping down was also about recognizing that the church needed to continue evolving and growing under new leadership. He knew that creating space for new perspectives and ideas was sometimes the best way to make sure an institution's success. His decision to leave was based on his belief that Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church could use a new leader with their own vision to guide the church into its next chapter. Jenkins had to make the difficult decision to leave a job he had spent most of his life doing because he had built strong relationships with the church community and with individuals he knew. His relationships with congregation members and the spiritual growth he had led made it an emotional and hard decision for him to make. However, his choice showed how humble he was and how he understood that true leadership sometimes means letting go for the good of the community. Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church was greatly affected by the death of Pastor Charles Jenkins. Jenkins had led the church through spiritual growth and change, and he had also made it a beacon of faith for social justice and community outreach in Chicago. Jenkins left behind a legacy at the church that included After years of juggling his job as a pastor with his career in gospel music, Charles Jenkins started a new chapter in his life, both professionally and personally, when he left Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church. He was committed to innovative ministry with a focus on empowering the next generation and a commitment to meeting the needs of the wider community through various social initiatives. It gave him more time to pursue his love of music and to look for new opportunities in the business. His choice gave him creative freedom and the chance to work on projects outside of traditional ministry. This change also gave Jenkins the chance to focus on his family, which had been. Jenkins had to balance his time and attention between his professional obligations and his family and friends because he was a pastor, musician, and public figure. Giving up the pulpit gave him the chance to rebalance his priorities and devote more time to his family and friends, spending time with his wife, kids, and own health and happiness. Jenkins' story shows how faith can change people. He has shown that problems are a normal part of life, but how you deal with them can lead to growth, strength, and inspiration. His journey is a reminder that hardship can lead to personal and spiritual growth, and that real strength comes from leaning on faith and community.